You are listening to Healing with Haley, episode 35. My friend doesn't like my podcast. Welcome to the podcast where it's all about healing, self improvement, our brains, and living your dream life. My name is Haley Kirk, and I'm a life coach, mom, and entrepreneur here to show you how to be the hero of your story. Welcome, you guys. I have one of my bestie friends, Kendee, on the podcast today. And we purposely made the title of this podcast clickbaity, provocative, um, so that you guys would listen. And the point of this is no one should be like a clone of everything that you like, right? And I think that's where like life becomes so juicy and yummy and variety and delicious, because when we can share differences in friendships, in partners, in life, it just adds so much more color and breadth, I think. So, Kendee, I'm gonna let you take this stage and explain the story behind this title of this podcast.
Okay.
And I just want to like give Kendee so much kudos because she she is just such an example of living authentically and doing what she preaches always. Like she's always been that way for me and in her own personal life. And I just love and adore her. So I can't wait to learn from her.
You're so kind. Um, so I haven't always been super authentic. I think I have been a people pleaser, and I think a lot of my friendships and relationships were just going along with what everyone else was saying or doing, and I didn't really speak up. And I was literally the person that was like, I'm cool with everything, and like I don't really have an opinion. And it didn't feel good though, because then I never really got to probably have depth with my friendships or be myself ever. So I've been practicing it. So it's a practice, and it was scary. I was like, okay, Haley, I have to tell you that like I listened to your podcast and I don't like it. And I like there was things
Yeah.
about it obviously that I liked, and I tried to say it as soft as possible. And I think I came into it with also curiosity. I wasn't like, I don't like your podcast and I'm not going to listen to it. I was mostly saying, hey, I just don't agree with some of these things, and podcasts take a lot of time to listen to, and my time's valuable, and I don't know that it would serve our friendship for me to just be listening on like whatever fast mode, not paying attention to your podcast just to like be a good friend. That wouldn't feel good for me. That's not going to feel good for you. And so I just decided like I'm just going to have to tell her, and we can talk through it and we can discuss it, and I'll be curious. I know she'll be curious with me. We've also had other conversations where we've gotten real and honest, and so I knew like, okay, we have some of these skills, we can do this. And I just kind of like threw it out there, and then like we talked about it. So, but it was scary. It was not easy to start that conversation and be real. I had to sit in it and be like, okay, I didn't like it, but I have to tell her. And how do I do this? So
Yeah.
how, it's fear of I could lose my friendship, and I really love you, and I didn't want to hurt your feelings. And also I was like, but we have to talk about this. And I was open to that conversation.
I even remember the Marco Polo because so Kenny and I, we should dive into our friendship really quick. So it was so funny. So I met Kendi dancing in Utah, and I just remember we like met once or twice, like social dancing, actually like talking. Because when you dance, you know all the guys and the guys know all the girls, but they don't know like their own gender. Like it's like their own.
Yeah.
But like we finally got to talking, and then I think like a few weeks later, you were like, "Hey, do you want to come to a congress with me?" And I was like, "Yeah, let's go."
I know, I didn't even know you that well. I'm like,
Oh,
come room in the same room. It'll be fine. I just knew I loved your energy. I knew
yeah,
you were a
same.
good person. And I was like, it'll be fine. If we don't like each other, we don't have to like hang out that much. But we ended up
Yeah,
building a really strong friendship.
it
So
did. Yeah, and that was probably 2020, like right during all of the messy COVID stuff. And so like not a lot of people were at that congress, and it was
yeah.
like small and intimate, and it really did create this bond of a friendship that's Oh, it's like 2024.
I know.
It's been longer, if I'm being honest. I'm
It
like,
does feel longer. It's weird to hear 2020. I'm like, no, we met in like 2017 or something, but it wasn't. It was 2020, which is
it
weird.
was, wow, 4 years. It feels so much longer than that. That's like
Yeah.
crazy. I'm now thinking about it. But regardless, so now Kendee moved to California and I moved to Maryland. So we both are like on opposite
I
sides of the
know.
world. Well, the United States. But then the way we stayed connected is through Marco Polo. And I remember your video of you were like, Haley, there's something I really need to tell you. And you were like taking deep breaths. And I was like, what is she gonna tell me? Like, I was like, does she not want to be my friend anymore? Like, there was a lot of anxiety on my end too. I was like, oh, like, did I hurt her? Or like, what did I do? Like, it was so, I could tell it was weighing on you. And then when you told me, I was like, literally, I'm being 100% honest. My reaction was like, oh, I don't care if she doesn't like my podcast. I was like, thank God, we're still friends. Like, it was,
Yeah, that's all it is. No big deal.
yeah, whatever. I don't care. I'm like, we're still friends. Everything's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Which I was relieved. I was like, okay. And then we talked about it.
Yeah, yeah. So let's dive in. So background on Kendee, she's an amazing therapist and you dive in. So you've done therapy, you've done all this training and you just are a
Yeah.
professional. I love it.
I've been lucky. I've been trained in a lot of research-backed trauma therapies. And so I really, really have a lot of experience with working with people with traumas, their belief systems, getting into the subconscious and really changing people's lives, but from like a really subconscious deep level. And it like then plays out in their real world life. It's really cool. There's some amazing therapies out there that people can use that are much better than just talk therapy. Like talk therapy is like 30% effective. It helps. It can be good for psychoeducation, but it's not super effective because the left brain is where talk therapy is, and the right brain is where our trauma lives. It's also where our emotions live, and it's where you have to get into a trauma therapy that gets into the right brain to really get into the body, to get into all of that stuff. So yeah, there's just different therapies out there, and they're not all the same. Not
Mhm.
every therapist is the same, and so it's kind of it's a hard relationship. I think even just finding healing, like who do I go to, and who's going to help me, and what's a good fit for me, and like there's a lot of resources out there, and not everything is going to be the right fit. So that
Yeah.
was kind of the biggest thing of like knowing what I know. I was having a hard time from like my professional side of me really agreeing with some of this stuff and just kind of going, I don't want to dive into like we can talk about all of that, but I don't necessarily want to like hear the whole podcast of like
Yeah.
where I don't necessarily agree from just some of the training that I've had. So that was kind of where I was coming from with it. But
Yeah. So let's like dive in. Do you remember what the podcast was talking about or anything?
it was a while ago.
I know
So
it's probably so long ago.
it was a long time ago. It was the first one, I'm sure, because I don't think I listened to more than the first one. And I loved how personable you were. There were so many things I loved. And I think just
Uh-huh.
whenever things get too much into what is considered cognitive behavioral therapy, which is CBT,
Hmm.
where like your thoughts and like how your thoughts determine everything. And it's true. Like I'm also trained in CBT, and like our thoughts change our behaviors, which changes like our actions, and all of that is all connected. And also if you can go deeper and get right into the subconscious, there's just other things that can happen from there. So there was just stuff in there that I just was like just having like a hard time with it, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you heard of Joe Dispenza?
Love his stuff. Yeah.
So because what he talks about is so he's done like 8,000 brain scans. And
Mm-hmm.
he says a lot of the things, at least, tell me if I'm wrong, that thoughts So if you change your personality, you change your personal reality is kind of like one of his big mantras.
Yeah.
And so he says that you have to remember a future. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that is so wild. Like, how do you remember a future? And
Yeah.
so it's to me, it's thought work is what he's doing. Is that wrong?
So in the training that I have, so if people want to look into accelerated resolution therapy, you can go to their website, accelerated resolution therapy, I think .com. But if you just type in accelerated resolution therapy, maybe you can like hyperlink it in your thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's a branch off of EMDR, which a lot of people are familiar with. It's doing rapid eye movement. And they actually have in their protocol, which I love, you direct your scene. And so when you're the director of your scene, you see yourself changing the scene. And so under rapid eye movement, you're changing the scene. And then you see yourself in the future changing the scene. And there's like a whole, I think, 12 or 13 step protocol
Uh-huh.
that you go through that literally creates a future world that you like see totally differently, which changes your belief system, changes your body. And the cool part too with accelerated resolution therapy is as you're doing the process, you're getting all of the negative sensations off your body as you go, because that stuff gets stuck and stored and it doesn't just go away. So there's a book called The Body Keeps the Score. It's also
Oh,
like a
by
really
Gabor
good.
Mate.
No,
Okay.
it's not Gabor Mate. It's a different one, but I love Gabor Mate. The Body Keeps the Score is written by, oh, I don't have the name of it. You'll have to like look, but so good. It's where like EMDR kind of got founded.
Oh, Bessel van der Kolk.
Yes, Bessel van der Kolk. I'm like, why can't I think of his name? But yes,
That's a
Bessel van
hard
der Kolk.
one. Yes.
Um, and it was kind of revolutionary. It's not revolutionary, but like it's like the old indigenous practices are now just like coming back around again, which is interesting. But yeah, just recognizing that like our bodies are holding our traumas and our bodies are kind of where our subconscious lives. And if we can shift and change what's happening, what's getting stuck there, it then changes our thoughts. And so it is thought work, but it's at like a much deeper level. But it's very similar to Joe Dispenza's work. So he's doing like it's interesting because like there are, like I said, there's other resources that you can get healing from as long as they're getting into that like right side of the brain that like it shifts and changes things. It's cool.
Okay. So the issue with thought work alone is it's
Mhm.
not going into the right side of the brain.
Exactly. And you can sit like I can work with a client and have them go, how's this thought true? How is this thought not true? And what's a better thought that you would want to have about yourself? And there could logically be like, yeah, I am, maybe the thought was I'm not strong, and they find out how that's true, and then also how it's not true, and then like they're like, oh, I am, I'm a strong person most of the time or whatever. But like if their body doesn't believe it, or they have like traumas or subconscious things that are like working against that like conscious thought, it like doesn't land or stick. If you can get
Mhm.
into the like either a meditative state or some way to get into the right brain, like sand tray therapy or any kind of like artwork, or like there's a lot of different ways you can do it. ART, I think, is one of the best and fastest just because it's like one of the newer therapies out there that's like super effective. But it creates the shift so you don't have to think about it so much. Like your body believes I am strong. And so then from there, all the branches come from there. You don't have to do all so much of that like thought work.
Mm. So what you see meditative. So what are your thoughts on like Byron Katie? Because she has a worksheet and
Mhm.
she says it's a meditative practice, that it can't just be done in the brain. So what are your thoughts on that?
I got introduced to Byron Katie's work years and years ago. I love her stuff. I love some of her stuff. I don't know that it quite matches fully with all the different like trauma therapies I've been trained in.
Hmm.
I think it relies there's elements there that don't account for maybe some of the traumas where you are a victim, where you're a child, where you were victimized, and you've got to get in and get that stuff off the body. Like some of her thought work is almost going to create protector parts. So internal family systems, that's
What is
another.
that? What is a protector part?
So a protector part is, in as smallest terms as I possibly can with it. So it comes from internal family systems, which is IFS. Some people may have heard of that. Richard Schwartz created it. And it's basically, we have parts of us. A part of us wants to get up in the morning and a part of us doesn't. And we have all these parts, right? Like every human has lots of different parts. And we have what I like to call protector parts, which could also, like in the IFS terminology, it's like firefighters and managers, but they're all under the umbrella of protecting us. They're all protector parts. And so we can have parts that come in that sabotage us, but they made lots and lots of sense when we were a child. So they're protector parts, they just get overprotective when we're not in that same environment anymore, where we're not dependent, where we can't leave, where we're stuck. When we're an adult, we're now independent and we can leave anything and we're not stuck, or really shouldn't be in situations where we're stuck.
Can you give an example of a protector part? Like you're saying, like something, it worked as a child, but now it's not working as an adult.
Now it's not working as an adult. So the protector part might be, I'm trying to think of like a good one. The protector part could be procrastination. Procrastination is, I would say, a protector part. So as a child, if you aren't getting maybe like your needs met and you don't have anyone, maybe your parents aren't able to help you do your homework and you're just overwhelmed with like everything that needs to get done. But you're going to get in trouble if you don't make it happen. You're going to have a protector part that keeps you from feeling overwhelmed because you're a child, you have no other support system. You can't get a support system other than your family system because you can't leave. You can't be like, just kidding, I want a different family. Like that doesn't work. You're in that family system. And so your parts will step in and do whatever they need to do to keep your nervous system from getting like blown up. Right. So we always say kids are super resilient. Well, they are, but that's because they have protector parts, but that can actually cause a lot of harm later. That's why like anxiety, depression, those would be protector parts also. But this procrastination part, right, is like, oh, kind of keeping you from getting something done. As a kid, that's probably really, really good. That's a good skill, because if you start doing it and it's overwhelming your system and you have no support, no help, and you're just overwhelmed for like a lot longer, that's not good for your nervous system. So it's like, wait, last minute, hurry and crunch. You're in like massive panic, but it's a short amount of time, which when you're a child makes way more sense because you can't get to better resources. So as a child up till you're 18, that's perfect. That makes sense. I always say protector parts are perfectly formed for your family system. So they're all great. It's just once you now leave that family system, and you could have different resources, right? You can reach out and do some different things. You might not know about them, but like you're an adult now, you're not stuck. You're not just left in that family system. You could go get a hug from a friend, or you could get some help, or you could watch a YouTube video or whatever. You're not in that family. You're now independent, but you're still procrastinating because that protector part doesn't know that like the trauma's over. And so you have to go in and do that work, and maybe even some inner child rescue work to help on that right side of the brain kind of release the charge and the trauma of the need for that protector part. And so then you can function as an adult, planning things out and like setting it out in like an orderly way, and like not waiting until the last minute. But like if you don't know that you have this protector part doing what it's doing, you don't know where it's coming from, it can just feel really frustrating. Or sometimes people like love their protector parts. I'm a procrastinator and it like works really well for me, and like I love it, and like, which can work, but sometimes you get in a relationship and the other partner doesn't really like that protector part. And so then how do I work with that? And so yeah, anyway, there's just like different things going on in the right side of the brain that are different than just thoughts.
Yeah. So that's so interesting. So Joe Dispenza, I was just listening to him actually before our podcast, and he was talking about how how addictive actually stress and anxiety and just pretty much any like negative emotion can be, because it gives us like this sense of like purposefulness.
Right.
And how in the animal world, like the natural world, like a deer, if they're aware of like danger, right? Then they go into that heightened state. And then once they're away from danger, then they calm down, and
Right.
they and a lot of animals actually do some kind of thing to like shake off
Shaking.
the
They
anxiety.
usually shake it.
Yeah. And then they just
Yeah.
keep grazing or whatever
Yep.
they were doing before.
Yep.
But humans can and or can be addicted to a state of like stress and anxiety and like fear and that like that survival kind of brain. And I was like, that's so interesting. So would that be considered a protector part?
Yes. And I don't actually think humans are addicted to it. I think they don't want it. Nobody wants anxiety. Nobody wants depression. They just don't know how. Well, there's a couple things kind of at play there. Like when the anxiety, I think as children, we actually do have built in things that we're just not allowed to do. Like children maybe need to like lay on the ground and like swing their arms around and have a tantrum and they're stopped from doing that. Or they need to cry. And how many kids are told, stop crying, don't cry anymore. And so our natural animalistic beautiful ways of releasing stuff gets stopped or halted. Like if you had a deer and you shocked them every time they like went to shake to release the trauma, you would now have a hyper vigilant deer all the time because they couldn't release their trauma. And so they would do similar to what we do as humans. It would now be this protector part that now is overprotective because now they're in hypervigilance all the time, and they would quote unquote be addicted to their anxiety, but not really. They would just need to get some different conditioning um, to shift that out of their body of like, okay, you're not going to get shocked anymore. You're now safe. You can let that anxiety go. And so what we do when we're doing trauma work with clients, and if you work with a trauma therapist, they should be getting into your body and getting into the memories that are connected to that anxiety. You're not addicted to the anxiety, but it's a protector part. And if once you release the charge, release the inner children that might be tied to that, the memories that have a charge to it, there's protocols for all of that stuff. Once all of that is now safe, that protector part goes, okay, you don't need to be in anxiety anymore. And I work with clients all the time that like come in, have been like diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder, have had anxiety like their whole lives and thought they just were genetically predisposed for anxiety. And I'm like, no, you were in a family system or whatever was going on that like that protector part came in. Let's do the work. And then by the end, when they're done with therapy, because my goal is like, let's get you out of here. You don't need to be in therapy forever. Like, let's release the stuff and have you live your life free of trauma, which when you're free of trauma, you're good. You're not, and like, they're like, I can't even believe it. I don't have anxiety anymore. My anxiety's gone. Like, so we're not addicted to it. We just don't know how to release it. We don't know how to get in to move it. And so interestingly enough, sometimes some of the hardest work with clients is they do get attached, or their protector parts get kind of stuck feeling like this is who I am, right? If they've kind of been in protective mode forever, there's a fear of, well, if I'm not anxious anymore and I come down, then who am I? And
Yeah.
how do I see my world? And so there's even protocols for that of how to like envision like how do you want it to look and how would you like to operate in the world, not procrastinating or not feeling like you need to be perfectionistic or anxiety or depressed or all of these different protector parts. Addiction itself is actually a protector part.
Wow.
Um, so anything you're addicted to, it's actually, addiction is an attachment disorder where you weren't getting the attachment you needed in childhood. And so whatever you get attached to, whether it's gambling, food, sex, drugs, alcohol, whatever, like that's what you like attach to because you don't have secure attachment. And so you go in and like heal that protector part, and then the addiction goes away. It's really
Wow.
cool.
Ah, such good gold nuggets. So what is for someone who's like, I hear trauma all the time, but like, what is
Yeah.
trauma? How would you define it? How would you know you have it? Dive into that.
I think most people have some levels of trauma. Um, Obviously, there are people that grow up in secure, attached family systems where they're getting emotionally coached and they get to have and feel whatever they need to feel, and they get to process stuff with an adult. They're not alone. I think Gabor Mate basically is like trauma is not, it's not the actual thing, it's being alone in that thing. And so having something happen, but not feeling like you can process it. If you're getting bullied at school and you come home and you can't share it, you can't cry, you can't process what's happening in a healthy way, that's now trauma. It's going to live in your body because it's just getting stuck and you're alone in this thing that's happening to you. If you're in a family system where you can't cry or you can't, get emotionally coached, that's going to be traumatic because you don't get to have a full human experience as a little person. And so that becomes traumatic. And the thing about trauma, the interesting thing about trauma is the trauma itself isn't the issue. I mean, we have to get that stuff off the body, that stuck fear, or that stuck sadness, or stuck maybe even helplessness if you're, being victimized and stuff like that. It's the belief system that comes from the trauma.
What?
So,
Oh, that's
yeah.
crazy. The
So
belief
when you're in
that comes from the trauma is the trauma?
is the thing that's holding all of that stuff. So like I work with sexual assault victims that have been sexually assaulted, which is horrific trauma, right? Your victim, it wasn't your fault, and this thing happened to you that you couldn't stop. But the brain wants to feel like it has some sense of control. And so a lot of the thoughts that will come in is somehow it was my fault. I should have been able to stop it.
Oh my
There's a
God.
lot of anger at our own bodies. If we've been victimized, like, why didn't my body stop it? I should have been stronger. I'm not strong enough. And like, so there's all these thoughts that keep us from feeling the grief. Because if those thoughts aren't true, then I just have to grieve and actually move all this emotion of like, no, actually, it wasn't my fault and I didn't do anything. And like, if you can process that out with a person and get all that stuff off your body, and the truth is, this person shouldn't have done this to me. Like, they were in the wrong. This was not okay. I am strong. And this is all the things I did that like helped me survive that situation. And I did a good job. It now doesn't have such a charge to it because it wasn't your fault. And it wasn't like, you're not holding all those belief systems about it.
Oh,
So,
that is so cool. I recently dove into the work of David Kessler. Do you know who he is?
I don't know if I do.
Okay, so he co-authored with the grief stages, the five grief stages.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's super awesome. And then he created a book called The Sixth Stage of Grief, which is Finding Meaning. And
Yeah.
I've been reading his book, diving into his work, and he said just what you said. He said the brain wants control so badly that it would rather you feel guilty
Yeah.
than feel hopeless
Yeah.
about whatever happened to you. And when
Yeah.
he said that, I was like
Yeah.
that blew my mind because exactly like what you said, like, oh yeah, I shouldn't, if I had listened to mommy or if I had listened to what society tells me, if I hadn't worn those things, then I wouldn't have been sexually abused. Rather than,
Yeah.
no, you were
There
totally
was zero
helpless.
reason. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
you were totally
you were
helpless. Like
victimized.
there was no hope that you could have done to prevent that from happening
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
reality wins, right? And it happened because it did, and there was no control that you
Yeah.
could have had in that event. And I was
Which is
like,
devastating to have to like process. Like, so like there's that
yeah,
like deep grief of like this thing happened and I couldn't stop it and it wasn't my fault and it shouldn't have happened. And so you just have to like grieve that. And
yeah.
then interestingly enough, again, it goes back to that animalistic stuff. If we can just let that stuff come off our body, we then feel better.
So what guide me through so let that stuff come off my body. What does that look
Mhm.
like? How do you start that? What is that?
Yeah.
Let that come off my body.
A lot of it is getting back in touch with our bodies. So that's why I love Joe Dispenza's work. He's big on meditation and really like sitting with your body and like letting stuff be. A lot of it's just accepting it. I feel sad and just letting yourself feel sad and knowing that you won't be sad forever. Like it's going to come and it's going to go. And I feel angry and like letting yourself feel angry and then, but doing something with it. Like obviously not that it's going to cause any harm to anybody. I'm always like, you can't hurt yourself, you can't hurt other people, you can't hurt property, but like throwing some pillows on your bed or taking a food noodle to like a wall or like getting that like physical or like going and working out and like getting that emotion of anger off your body. And then usually underneath that is sadness. And so then letting the sadness come. And so a lot of it is just kind of undoing what we learned in childhood, which a lot of children in childhood learned to don't feel the emotions. You're not sad, you're fine. I mean, how many parents do you walk around seeing them say, you're okay, it's okay, you're fine, you're okay.
When
And
people say
I
that to my
cringe.
son, I'm like, shut up.
Yeah,
It's okay that he's not okay.
I know. And but a lot of people are uncomfortable with it because they weren't allowed to just grieve and cry and like let it come out. So if you hold a child and they're crying, they'll cry and cry and cry, and then they'll stop and then get off your lap and go run around again. Like if they And if we cry, we'll cry and cry and cry until we're done crying, and then we'll move on with something like you can't cry forever. You
You
literally cannot
can't.
cry forever.
Yeah, I
And
love
I
that.
and like you're not going to like you're going to be okay. Like your body's going to let you process. And sometimes crying, I think, is the hardest emotion because it literally like it's like so physical, right? You're like
Yeah,
breathing and you feel
for
like your
sure.
heart's breaking and it's just is so heavy. And if you can just let yourself move it and stay in it and don't shut it down and don't stop it and let your body run its full course, the next day you're gonna feel a whole lot better because it
Mhm.
releases whatever that stuff was. So we have built in things already in our bodies, like
Mhm.
shaking even. Children, you'll see them like the little toddler just shaking, and then you'll see
That's
parents be like,
true.
"You're fine." I don't, like they're not allowed to be scared, they're not allowed to be angry, they're not allowed to cry, and so we just shut them down. It'd be like shutting down a deer, like shocking them every time, like don't shake, don't shake, don't shake. Eventually, you'd have if we did that to all the deer, we'd have a bunch of deer walking around, super hyper vigilant, super anxious, like
Yeah.
not just grazing. So you could literally create anxious animals also. It's not that animals are like doing it. Like we can do the same thing and we already have it built in us, and babies and children, toddlers have it already built in. We
Mhm.
just literally like ruin it.
That's interesting. The only difference between nature, if I hear what you're saying right, the only difference between nature and us is they're not getting the conditioning to not process their traumas that
Right.
we are.
They don't, yeah.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
nuts. I had never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a lot of what we do in therapy is literally giving people permission to cry, giving them a safe space to like say they're angry or say they're sad or say what they're feeling and like actually process what was stuck because they couldn't at the time. And so just getting people back into their bodies, back into their emotions, allowing all emotions to be okay, was really just giving them permission to be human, which they should have gotten when they were little.
Yeah. That's actually reminding me of something. So I've done so much therapy and I love therapy. I
Yeah.
think one of my issues with it felt like this. It felt like open heart surgery where I would like pour my heart out,
Mhm.
all my yucky, get it all out. And then they'd be like, okay, see you next session. And I'm like, oh, hold on,
Ah,
wait a
I'm
minute.
raw. Yeah.
I'm open and
Yeah.
like, how do we close this up? Like,
Yeah.
it felt like
Yeah.
that. And I think that's where like life coaching thought work helped me is because I was like,
Mhm.
okay, like I know this is how I feel right now. I don't want to feel this way anymore. And I've processed this. How do I
Mhm.
move? I want to move forward. I want to keep going. And so that's where I really like the model of circumstances, thoughts, feelings, actions, results, because you could point out, okay, I'm sad, process that. Okay, now what? So now it's like, I don't want to be sad anymore. I want to be empowered. And so you'd put like empowered in the feeling line. And then you say,
Mhm.
okay, so if I want to feel empowered, what do I need to think? Or what do I need to do? What actions do I need to
Mhm.
do? So, what are your thoughts about that and my experience as a therapist trained in trauma?
Yeah. First off, I'm sorry that that was your experience, that it was just like this raw, like, I'll see you next week. And you're like, huh. I do think therapists, a lot of the training that I've gotten with my trauma therapy is ending the session in like a nice closing way of like ending. I always end my sessions with, let's spread something positive. So they're ending on some empowering note of using rapid eye movement. Let's build this like positive quality that maybe you didn't get as a child, or maybe you haven't experienced as much. So there's this like they're ending the session feeling maybe calm or confident or whatever word they pick to like be like, okay, and then buttoning it down of like, let's just only do trauma in here. You get to live your life. Like, let's just keep this more contained. And so there's a lot of things that can happen to make it more contained. But I do think a lot of people do experience, I've heard of it. I've definitely seen clients that come in and I'm like, oh, I'm sorry that was like, it's traumatizing to have all your stuff get opened up and then there isn't a container, or there isn't a like nice soft landing ground to get through the week. And you're like, that was a lot. I like that's too much. And so it's not really supposed to be like that. It is supposed to be more contained, that you're just working through the traumas in the therapy session. And then the rest of your week, the anxiety isn't there and you feel better. And like it should be an empowering kind of week.
Mm.
So there was definitely stuff going on there that like wasn't helpful. And I think I wish there was more information out there of like what good therapy could look like. Because I think a lot of people do have some bad experiences. And so it's not helpful. Kind of like for like, I just think of a deer. If you were like, okay, now you're free, and like just letting it just like shake and shake and shake for hours. And like there was no like, okay, like let's close this down and let's like, let's let you graze. Yeah, like let's like take a breather. And it doesn't need to be guided and molded because it's trauma. Like we're dealing with like traumas for people in their bodies, and they do need that support and guidance and help. And so I wish there was more maybe care or structure in some of that. And so that's why I say not all therapists are going to be the same, and not all therapy is going to be the same. And those are things you can advocate for or ask for in your therapy of like, I want to end this on a good note. I don't want to walk out raw. What do you have in place that like is going to do that for me? And they should have some sort of protocol that they can use to create that for you. But if you don't know that, you're just like, therapy was great, but also really like hard and heavy. And I do like that thought process stuff. I just think like it depends on where a person is at. If they have a lot of trauma, those thought process worksheets could actually get taken over by a protector part. Oh,
Ooh,
I am a
explain.
perfectionist and I'm gonna like, I got this like thought process thing. And so my protector part is running this like practice of thought work, which can work for a time, but eventually, like protector parts aren't meant to be on all the time. They're literally meant to come in during like a kind of a high intense thing and then go back into like retirement. They're just like on call and then not on call. Like they're not really meant to be on all the time, kind of like a deer. Like, oh, that was scary. Okay, step back. We don't need to be present anymore. If there's too much trauma there or there's stuff that hasn't been worked through, thought work or CBT or like overdoing it on thoughts can actually just be a protector part, like getting really, really like good at being the good girl or the good boy, or like whatever they used in childhood that worked really well. Oh, I'm a straight A student, perfectionist. Awesome. I got this thought work thing, but it's not really going to like get the shift or change in their body that they would need. And eventually it'll like come out, like there'll be like resistance to it, or it'll be really difficult, or anxiety will start to come, or the body will literally kind of let them know like this isn't really working, which is the same reason why medication doesn't fully work, because it's meant to be used with like a practice of somehow getting the stuff off the body, not to just numb the body. So I've got people that have been on like anxiety medication, they increase it, and try different ones and increase it. And they're like, my anxiety just won't go away. And I don't know what to do now. I'm at like the most, like they've tried everything, right? And I'm like, well, your body is trying to let you know that like you got to heal the thing that medication is trying to numb. So it's okay to have a little bit of a numbing, but there should also be a release happening at the same time, because the medication can't really fix anxiety. It's
Right.
from it.
So how do you like, I guess that's where it feels like I'm I'm talking like raw and honest. This is like what comes up in
Yeah.
my head with trauma. I'm like, okay, this is Haley speaking.
Okay.
So I feel like I've processed my traumas,
Yeah.
but how do I know if there's like deeper parts that I haven't healed? Because I feel like maybe for someone like me who has healed a lot of their traumas and has done
Right.
work, that work
Right.
works really well. But
Right.
like, how do you know you've healed your trauma? It feels like this
Yeah.
uncertain fine art kind of, I'm gonna be honest, like pseudo thing. Like it's like you could be healed or you couldn't be healed. And I'm not trying to be insensitive. I'm just trying to
Right,
like,
for
that's
sure.
like where my brain goes. I'm like, well, like,
Yeah.
how does someone know they're ready? You know?
Yeah. I will say this. I feel like had you started with some of this thought work before you did all of that therapy that you did, and I know you did a lot of the like right brain work. So I know you did like not just talk therapy, you did the rapid eye movement stuff.
Yeah,
Um,
I did.
yeah. So I know that already about you. So I can say, like, I know you did like the deep work. Had you started with just this thought work, it would have created some anxiety. There would have been just this like it probably would have been a protector part stepping in, being like, I got this. I'm a go-getter and I'm motivated. And like all your like parts would have like been like, cool, doing this, got this. And it would have numbed you for a bit. And at some point there would have been this like, it wouldn't have been working. And
But
so
how do you
I
know? But
think,
how do you know when trauma is like gone or like healed?
I mean, you should feel calm. You should feel like really our homeostasis like base is peace. Like we're meant to feel mostly peace or calm is kind of like our base. And then like from there, we might feel sad and then we might feel happy and we might feel like all these other emotions, but like our baseline emotion we're kind of going back to is like peace. And if people who have anxiety, their baseline is anxiety. Like they're literally like when I talk to them, they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, your baseline should be calm. And they're like, that's crazy. Because their baseline is anxiety and like they'll have moments of peace, but like they're like anxious all the time or depressed or, like it can be different things. So I think
So
when
trauma shows up as an emotion.
it shows up, yeah, as belief systems, like really deep-seated belief systems and emotions. And it's almost like illogical. Like, and you've talked with people sometimes where you're like, they're like saying things that you're like, that doesn't make sense, or that like, I'm not beautiful. And you're like, but you're gorgeous. Like, where's that coming from? And like, no matter what you say, or no matter how you spin it, and like it comes out in these like triggered moments for them. A lot of times our triggers is information or um, now the difference would be, is it like stopping your functioning, right? If I have a trigger, like being a human, you're going to have a trigger. Being human, you're going to have anxiety, you're going to have emotion, but are you able to move it? And I do a lot of thought work because I've done a lot of therapy myself also. So I do challenge my thoughts and I do a lot of that thought work. And I also ask the question, like I'll take a minute and just like say, is there anything else here to
What is that?
check? Do I
What
have
does
an
asking that question do? Is there anything else here?
it can allow you, like if you do it meditatively, right? Like close your eyes. Is there anything else here? I might have like a 3-year-old that pops up of like a little 3-year-old inner child that's like connected to that trigger. And then I can go and rescue that 3-year-old. There's a book called Homecoming by I'm so horrible with like authors. I know his last name's Bradshaw, but I don't know his first name. Um,
Something that pops up is Homecoming by Kanye West.
not that one.
Oh,
He's not gonna
Reclaiming
help me.
Healing, John Bradshaw.
John Bradshaw. Yeah, see, there we go. Um,
Oh, that's a good book.
it's
Cool.
an inner child workbook, and it actually is like you can do it at home. You don't have to do it with a therapist. It can help to do it with a therapist. Like if you're doing inner child work, it's hard to like do your inner child work on your own, like like doing all that work. It can be helpful to have another person kind of walk you through it. But you don't have to. You can do your own inner child work and rescue them. So really, like anybody can go, like we don't have to have a therapist, but I do think we have to have the skill sets of it. So if you've done enough of the work, like, and when I work with my clients, a lot of times I'm like, okay, like you have the skills, you know how to do inner child work. We've cleared off like all the big traumas, and they'll feel it. They'll do like a body scan and they'll be like, yeah, like I really feel, and they'll know it because during the week they feel different. Things are different. Their life feels different. Um, they feel done. They're kind of like, yeah, I'm done with therapy. Like and I'll be like, yeah, come back for a maintenance session if you need it. But many clients, I'm like, we're good, we're done, and we'll have like a closure session. And like, I'll be like, I'll see you when I see you. I don't know when that'll be. And I know they're not really going to need me that much because they have the tools, they have the skills. So it's just getting enough of them to be able to to do it kind of on your own. So the thought work stuff is a skill. It's a great tool. I just think people just need to be mindful of if I'm getting bumped into it, if I keep like hitting a wall, I might need the support of like a right brain modality to kind of get into whatever that is. When I move and shift that, then I can kind of go back to the thought work again, because it's the difference of the left brain versus the right brain.
That's so cool what you just said. If I'm no, so what is it? So if I notice that something keeps coming up, what is that something? Is that something what you're insinuating to be a trauma that needs to be processed by the right brain? Left brain?
Yeah,
Okay.
right brain. The right brain.
Left. Oh, right brain.
Left is logical, left is our conscious brain, right
Okay,
is
LL.
yep, 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 yep.
Left is logical.
Yes, yes. Left is logical. Left is where like our protector parts are, because they're like doing all that, so when we get into the right brain, we're bypassing the protector parts.
Mm.
This is why people love plant medicine, because it bypasses all the left brain stuff. You can get into the right brain and you can go on a journey with plant medicine and heal a lot of stuff. I don't know that it heals all of it. That's where people can get kind of like in a mess with it, but it does open up and access and stuff that like it's getting right into that right brain trauma work, and like you can move a lot of stuff in that space. So there's, like I said, there's tons of modalities that can do it. You just have to be mindful of what you're looking for and have that just maybe some knowledge of like how you want to go forward with it. But yeah, I don't know
Oh,
if I answered
I'm
your
learning
question.
so much. This is so cool. So I've always wanted to ask a therapist this. So you remember like do you remember Elizabeth Smart?
Yeah.
So for those who don't know Elizabeth Smart, she was kidnapped and it was like for years. And then they finally found her. It was like this waitress at a Denny's. And she was like, that's Elizabeth Smart. And then she was rescued, of course. And then she didn't want to do therapy. But
Right.
what
She didn't
she
want to
did,
talk about it because it was horrific what had happened to
yeah,
her. She was a child, and it was horrible, the horror she went through.
right. And so what she ended up doing, it was so cool. It was her mom had said something to her that really impacted her. It was like something along the lines of like, honey, you get to decide how you want to live the rest of your life. If you live the rest of your life remembering everything that had happened to you, you're letting them win. So how do you want to move forward with it? And so then I guess from that, she decided to do like equestrian therapy with like the
Yeah.
horses.
Horses. Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that whole thing?
I love it. And I totally agree. I don't think like our past should like impact us in that way. And like nobody like that has harmed us should have that much power. Now, if she hadn't done equestrian therapy and her mom had said that and then she just like didn't do therapy, she wouldn't have been okay. You can't just move on from trauma. Like your body keeps the
Right.
score, like it's held there.
Yeah.
There's, and I don't know enough about horse therapy, but because you're working with animals, there's like, you're almost like there's like a releasing of your trauma from your body as you work with the animals. So
That's
they cry, like, so she would have been crying. She would have been like moving stuff off her body as she worked with those animals. Um, and that's where like the power of like the right brain and getting that off her body so that it can shift and change the belief system for her comes in. So it's another one of those modalities that I do believe works with the right side of the brain. But had she not done something like that, and the cool part about why I love ART probably the most out of all the ones I'm trained in, I do a mix of them, but like ART is my base. And I use the other ones to kind of support it. You don't have to talk about what you went through. You're literally
oh,
just,
that's so
so you
good.
have to see it. So the person under eye movement, like if I'm the client, I have to see my scene. And so like Elizabeth would have had, but she would have had to anyway. She's having PTSD. She would have been having those like anyone who's been
Everyone
through,
does.
yeah,
Yeah.
you have those like moments of like, I don't know exactly what that looked like, but you don't have to say anything. So it's such a beautiful therapy of, all I ask as the therapist is, were you in the beginning, middle, or end? And they just say middle. And I say, great. They don't tell me anything more than that. And so not until you're actually changing and directing the scene and you've like changed like what it looks like, do you even talk about it? And you don't ever have to talk about the original scene. So you see
Oh,
the original scene, you move the stuff off your body, but you don't have to talk about it. And they did this therapy with war veterans that had tried like they had tried exposure therapy, they tried EMDR, they had tried like all these other IFS, like they've done all these therapy modalities that were supposed to help with their PTSD, and they were still struggling. It wasn't working. They did ART, which is um, a different protocol of kind of EMDR. It's rapid eye movement, but the protocol is so beautiful. Um, their trauma, like they went back later, years later, and they're like PTSD. They were sleeping at night. They weren't having flashbacks. Like
it's
they
amazing.
had significant shifts. And you
Mhm.
can look this up on their website and they'll talk about all this stuff. But
Yeah.
because there's tons of research on it, they specifically used veterans because they wanted to show like this, you don't have to talk about it. You don't have to say what you saw.
Ugh.
You can just see it, and we won't ask you any questions other than beginning, middle, end. Okay, at the middle, start where you left off. Okay, keep going. And that first time through is the hardest. And then after that, it gets better and better and better until like you're just like you can't change the memory. You can't change what happened, but it's almost like the memory has like no charge. It almost doesn't exist. You've shrunken it. Like the memory's there, but it's like not, it's like has no, they're just, and people are literally like, it's so weird. Like it doesn't have a charge anymore. And I never thought it wouldn't have any kind of charge for my body. And so I always say, like, listen to your body. If you're getting triggered and charged a lot about something, it's your body's way of saying, hey, there's something here. There's a reason. Bodies are amazing. Brains want to heal, and they're trying to get you the information to go get that healing. And now we actually have therapies that like can match it.
That is so, that is amazing. That's because when I was in social work, I worked in the Children's Justice Center in Utah. And
Yeah.
that was like before they organized it perfectly, where the child would just have to report, like, say it one time. So it was like
Right.
before a child would have to do it to the police officer, to the social worker, to the
So
criminal
awful.
investigator. Like they would have to retell the story every time. And it was like
Yeah.
re-traumatizing them. So then
Yeah.
they just had to do it one time.
Yeah.
But this is even cooler because they don't even have to say it at all.
They don't. And actually, interestingly enough, when I got trained in it, they said if you're working with any sexual assault victims, find out first like when their court date is, and if they like sometimes you just have to get them resourced enough to be able to do the court date, because it's odd to go into court and not have a charge anymore, right? Because
Oh,
you're talking about this sexual assault and you're trying to like if they're pressing charges and you're needing to
evoke
tell what
emotion.
happened to
Yeah.
you, because the protocol works so well, it'll literally take the charge away so you can talk about this thing that happened almost third party-esque about it, because
Ah,
you've reworked the whole trauma, you've reworked the memory, you've rescued and changed it, and like so it's that powerful that you kind of have to go, are you going to need to be emotional? Do we need to wait? Like, can we resource you until
wow.
then? But it works fast. So in about an hour and a half, you can get through the whole protocol if you don't have like really strong protector parts. So some people have complex PTSD, and so that's it might take a little longer. But really, like in an hour and a half, you can do a scene. And the cool part is brains will cluster stuff. So like if you had a traumatic childhood or you have several traumas, like your brain, let's say like your whole third grade year you were bullied, your brain will pick one memory and cluster all of third grade into that one memory, so you don't have to do every single memory. So it's really cool that way.
Amazing.
Yeah, which makes it faster because brains really do want to heal. They're not meant to be in therapy forever. Like you really
Right.
aren't.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, that is so cool. That is so cool. So I keep wanting to ask this question because I don't think I get it
Okay.
fully.
Okay.
When you say, let's say I'm a new client, right? And
Yeah.
I'm like, this thing happened to me. I really think it's trauma that I'm trying to process. How do I get this off my body? What skill set, because you said it's a skill set, of how to release trauma from your body. So kind of like generically walk me through it. Like, what does that mean when
So,
trauma gets off the body?
okay. So if I were working with this client, I would do ART and I'd say, let's do your scene. And then I would do the whole protocol. Um, and that would be the best case scenario. If like a client note, like if you can get in, ART works really, really fast. You don't even have to like talk about your child. Like you can just literally say, I have this one trauma scene. I want to do a whatever, 1 or 2 sessions on just the scene. And the therapist will be like, okay. And they're like, I don't even know what the scene really even is, other than you have your scene clearly. Okay, cool. Like they don't have to do like a whole like history necessarily. So it can be kind of cool that way too, of people just being like, I just want to pop in, do a session. And like that's what's powerful about ART. You don't have to like go through your whole like my dad was this and my mom was that, like you might want to, but you don't have to. Um, but they're gonna be it's visual, so we use our imagination. So when we're in the right side of the brain, it's all sensations and like imagination. So if they feel like their stomach feels like tight knots, okay, make that more visual. And so under rapid eye movement, it's you're seeing those knots get undone, or you're using like I always say like a Harry Potter wand, and they're like doing kind of magic imagination, and then like they'll work on it until it's gone, and then they'll open their eyes and I'll be like, now how does your stomach feel? And they're like, oh my gosh, it feels so much better. I had no, like it's crazy. Like it's that fast, because when you get into the right side of the brain and move the sensation or the pain or the tension or the tightness or the whatever it is, it then like it's gone.
Mm, wow.
So you can do
Sounds a
it. You
lot
can
like
actually.
what Joe Dispenza does.
Yeah, so that's why I love Joe Dispenza. He gets
Wow.
people to do the imagination. So he's getting them into the right side of the brain, because when
Mhm.
our brains are so incredibly powerful, our brains don't know the difference between imagination and reality.
Yeah.
And children are incredibly gifted at using their imagination. And there's actually some really interesting studies that like um, going to school actually, and that's a whole other topic, but like going to school actually takes out children's imagination, because they're taught like so
Mm,
much rigid stuff. And so our superpower as humans is our imagination. And how many adults struggle with imagination?
so much.
Yeah. So if you're doing thought work, I think if you can tap into imagination with it, then it's going to be way more powerful, because you're actually like combining the left and the right brain. Like as much as you can get things into the right brain, that's where like all the good stuff is. Because
Wow.
our subconscious runs the show. It's like 80, 90% of like our world is created from our subconscious, and our conscious only has power over like 10 to 15 or 20%. I don't know what the numbers are specifically, but like, so when you're doing CBT, you're literally only like taking over power of like 10% of what your brain can really do. So why not get into that, like the
Okay,
engine?
so that's where I'm gonna cut in because
Okay.
what I understand, and especially with what Joe Dispenza talks about. So today he was just talking about this. He was like 80 to 90% of what you're thinking and believing is creating your reality. And
Mhm.
80 to 90% of what you're thinking is negative and repetitive from the past. So
Right.
if you can genuinely believe new thoughts,
Yeah,
new realities, you become a different person.
you do. It's just, you're just only, again, that's all true. All of that's true, but that's working with just like 10% of your brain. It's all left brain stuff. So I always tell clients, I do teach them CBT, because that's a really good skill for them to have, of like challenging it. I always say it puts cracks in your subconscious, because you're cracking it by like, the thought comes in, I'm not beautiful, or I'm not smart. But we'll go with that one. I'm not smart. Maybe you learned that when you were in second grade and you raised your hand and everyone laughed at you, and so you felt stupid or whatever. There's probably some memories tied to it. But current day, you're, work doing your life and you're just like, I'm not smart. And then you can go, that's not true. I am smart. Like I've done this and I've done this, and like you can challenge it, right? But you're gonna have to do a lot of work consciously to then get your subconscious to believe it. It can work, it's just harder. So if you could do some right work stuff with it, which is what I do. It's what I'm trained in. So I'm like, so I love it. I'm always like, what's your negative thoughts? What are the things that you're like struggling with the most?
Hmm.
Great. Eye movement. Let's get in and where does this live in your body? Where like what memories are tied to this? Let's go heal that stuff because then they don't have that thought anymore. Their thought is now I'm smart. They don't even have to like so then when clients have healed their traumas, most of their thoughts during the day are not negative thoughts.
Mm. Well, because okay, our brains, right? There's parts of it we control, and then
Mhm.
there's other parts that are just like on a
Subconscious. Yep.
yeah, they're just
The
autopilot,
right brain.
right?
Yes.
So
That's the right brain.
that's interesting. So, because I'm from what I've learned in thought work is that they didn't make a distinction of what part of the brain that
Mm-hmm.
that ego or the repetitive negative parts of our brain come into. So where does ego exist? Is it the left or the right brain?
So here's where I don't like this is where my whole philosophies differ entirely. I don't actually believe in an ego
Oh, is
because
that from your trauma
because
training?
and that would all mostly be from my IFS parts work training, I would say. Um, that I, like the stuff I've learned about parts work is because we don't have any bad parts. And ego oftentimes takes on like a bad part space or this part that's trying like I see ego like when people use the word ego, I'm always like, okay, well, what's the like it's a protector part. Like what's it doing? How's it trying to help you? Um, so I
At
think
least
it's
in like
from
at least in like where the thought work people that I listen to like Eckhart Tolle or Byron Katie, the only thing they use for ego is like it's anytime there's an identification with the mind and whatever the mind is doing, which operates in survival mode, right?
Mhm.
Everyone's out to get me. Oh, someone's gonna kill me at any moment, right? Those kinds of thoughts. That's ego
Mm.
taking precedent in the mind.
Yeah. And I would say that's a protector part. And you're going to have several different ones because not everyone has that thought. Not everyone's like, oh, everyone's out to get me. But if one person does have that thought, I would be like, oh, well, what? Tell me, like, where's that coming from? Tell me about that part. Like, protector parts are always protecting a memory or an inner child. And so, again, that's why I always go into that trauma stuff. Like, ego isn't this thing that's like trying to cause harm, it's a protector part trying to get your attention. And it no longer makes sense. Like everyone's out to get me might have been a really great protector part in your childhood. Like in order to
So a
survive,
thought could be a protector part.
oh, most of them are, yeah,
Most thoughts are protector parts.
especially if they're negative.
Interesting. So a
Mhm.
protector part, if I'm hearing how you're explaining it right, is something from a trauma
Mhm.
that helped you get through the trauma.
Yeah,
So it could be a behavior, an emotion, or a thought, but it's
right.
usually a thought.
That's usually how we find it.
Oh, okay.
But it could be a behavior, right? OCD is just a protector part.
Wow.
Yeah,
So interesting.
I
This
know.
is so cool. Like diving into your um training
Yeah.
and how you process healing in general
Yeah.
is like it's so different from the world that I'm in. But it's
Yeah.
like it's so
They're
beautiful.
not against each other, but they're just
No.
not it's like you just have to know the limitations or where it could cause harm. So if I'm
Yeah.
doing CBT with and I think even therapists can do that. Like if I'm only doing CBT with a client and I'm just like challenge that thought and they just keep coming back and like they're going to get frustrated of like I know I'm not supposed to feel anxious but I do feel anxious and the thought is that I can't get out of bed but then you keep telling me that I need to challenge it and then I can't get out of bed and then I feel worse because now I'm failing at therapy too like it can really cause a lot of harm because
Mm.
it's like I'm trying to do this thing and I keep challenging that thought but it's not changing or shifting versus like I'll use it for a second. It's kind of my like touch on it like a little touch. And I usually use it to get into the right brain. What was the negative thoughts you had this week? Or what was the
It's
hardest
your
thing you went through
base.
this
It's
week?
where you
Yeah,
started. And
where I
that
start.
kind of, oh,
That sends me, okay, now let's do the eye movement, let's do the protocol, let's get into the body and find where is this thought, because the body is our subconscious. So yeah, it's really kind of cool when you think of it that way. Like our body's like
wow.
is our subconscious. And so this is where like dance therapy works. Like when people are doing yoga or moving their bodies a lot, this is why people who work out feel better because they're actually moving their traumas. They are getting that like
I was
movement.
gonna ask you that. I was
Mhm.
gonna ask you that because I
Yeah.
noticed, I noticed the people that are dancers or
Yeah.
who are at the gym, they typically are very self-aware people and they're
Yeah.
very like in tune with their bodies.
Yeah.
Really?
But yeah, so it's not gonna it's one of those things where you can work out and still maybe need some more tools about how to do relationships better, or there could be some traumas that are still there that you might be like numbing from. But like 100%, if I can get my clients moving, if they're like again, I'm all about like your body is holding your stuff. If you can get it moving either visually or physically or in some way, it's gonna like let that trauma release out. So there's multiple ways to heal. You just have to be like specific about like what you're doing and why and how it's going to help.
So someone could go to the gym potentially with a protector part thoughts and do trauma work.
Oh
That's
yeah, I've had clients go to the sauna because in a sauna you're sweating and they've done inner child work in the sauna. It's
that's
beautiful. So
amazing.
a lot of it is connecting your brain to it though, because you can go to the gym and work out and nothing, all you do is move your body, which is still great.
Yeah.
But like if you go to the gym and you're like, I'm so angry, and you're like moving all this stuff and you're moving all that anger out, you're gonna actually be able to like feel better in your body because you were intentional about the body movement that you were doing.
Oh my God. This is amazing. So I this so much is coming up for me right now. There have been so many times at the gym where I would think about like a relationship or some kind of memory
Yeah,
and I would be crying.
yeah, yeah.
I'd
Same
be
with
crying.
massage. Like you can get a massage and start crying. Body work.
Really?
Yeah, like a lot of massage therapists will say that they know that like they'll work on someone and like they'll that like they might start crying or like that's like you're moving stuff off the body. So yeah, it invokes that release that whatever was stuck or stored. So those tears are coming out because you're moving some stuff and you're not stopping it, and so then it'll come out. So more people should be crying at the gym. If I had my way, I'd be like, we all should be crying. Like release, get it out, let it go. You'll feel better,
You
I
need to
promise.
cry more.
Oh my gosh, especially men. I'm like, cry. It's okay, cry, please cry. Like I do that's a lot of the work I do is getting people comfortable crying again because it was so shut down for them, especially men.
You know what's
Yeah.
kind of interesting for me is I notice when I cry, like when I do cry, it's a very like like it's
Yeah.
kind of like that, like a it's it's kind of hyperventilating a
Yeah.
little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I wonder if that was like if that was a part of my childhood not being able to cry or like I don't know what that means to hyperventilate when you're crying.
I think it's just your body doing what bodies do because you have also cried and not hyperventilated. And it's not
Yeah,
like you were, yeah. So
yeah.
I always say your body will do whatever it needs to do. It'll hyperventilate if that's the thing it needs to release, or water will just come out of your eyes if that's like whatever it is. It will do its thing if we let it do its thing.
That's amazing. Okay, let me
Mhm.
ask you more. I have so many questions. It's gonna be a long podcast.
Okay, we might have to like,
Hush it up.
yeah,
Yeah. Um, so when you're listening to music or watching a movie, I literally just had this experience last night. I
yeah,
was watching WandaVision. Have you seen that
yeah,
show?
yeah, I have.
It's so good. The literally the so with David Kessler's work on grief, he says,
Yeah,
you know, the stats have come in. I double checked the data. You're gonna die. And I
Yeah.
was like, oh. Yeah,
Oh,
it was like everyone like laughed.
yeah.
He's so good at making it like light and funny, but still like deep and meaningful.
Yeah.
And he's like, you're going to say goodbye to everyone.
Mhm.
You're going to die,
Yeah.
and everyone around you is going to die. And I was just like, oh, that's visceral, right? Like that's like a
Mhm.
hard reality. And at the end of WandaVision, if you guys have not seen the show, just skip
So
like
sorry.
30 seconds. But she says goodbye to her family.
Yeah.
And it's like that scene, right? Where everything's like ending and
Mhm.
the world she created is now closing and Wanda and Vision, her husband, are like holding hands and watching the end come. And I
Mhm.
was just bawling
Bawling.
my eyes out. And what came up for me was like, I really hate goodbyes.
Yeah.
I really hate goodbyes. And I've recently had to say goodbye. And it's like, it was so painful. It was
Yeah.
so painful. And I started to cry. And so, is crying while watching a movie or listening to music a way of processing trauma?
Oh, absolutely. It's a beautiful. In fact,
Really?
I will recommend it to clients that are struggling to cry and they're like, I know I'm feeling sad and I can't let myself cry. And I'll be like, watch a show that makes you cry. So and for those of us who, I mean, I grew up in a home where like it was stop crying, I'll give you something to cry about. Don't cry. You were sent to your room. It was punished.
Yeah.
So I will, if I know like I can feel like I need to cry, but it's like not coming, I'll literally intentionally watch a movie that I know will make me cry. And while I'm watching that movie, I'm crying, but I'm also like allowing my body to just like cry bigger or cry more, or like it'll allow like the tears to start to come out. So, and music, same thing. It's like it's a beautiful way to like get that movement. Um, I think if you grew up in a home where you were allowed to feel emotions, you might not have to do as much of that work, but you can still watch a movie and cry. And it's a connection. It's like, what is it about this that touched you? And then other times it won't. And so again, we'll cry when we need to, and we won't cry when we don't need to. And like if we just let it do its thing, it's our healing power. I call it, it's one of our superpowers.
Let our body do its thing.
Let our body do its
Oh,
thing.
that's a
Yes.
good little snippet. I love it. Um, Last question for parents.
Yeah.
I know I have some young mamas listening to this podcast.
Yeah.
So
Bless
as a
their heart. It's hard.
it is, I
So
know.
hard.
Yeah, Kendee's a mom of four, right?
Yeah. And I did a lot of it wrong. So it's just hard. But yes.
Yeah. And so being a mom of four and a trauma-informed therapist with amazing skill training, and you continue to skill train, which I love.
Yeah.
So, what do you recommend for moms in general, parents in general, on how to help our kids emotion process, trauma process, not cause trauma, like
Yeah.
dive into all that?
Oh my goodness. The best recommendation I can give is someone that's already like done the research and who I recommend all of my clients to read and who I wish I would have read when I was like a young mama. But you can always do the repair work. Dr. Becky. So Dr. Becky Good Inside is a must read. Like every person needs to read it. And the cool part about Dr. Becky is she's a researcher. She's similar to Brene Brown in that like she's very personable and people like love reading her stuff. And her book is just like an easy read. And she has a website, drbecky.com, and her stuff is really affordable. So I think she's trying to make
Yeah.
it like accessible to as many people as possible, which I just love that too. But she basically combines Gottman and pack therapy and EFT and attachment theories and all the trauma research that we have. Like she basically takes it all and then like makes this like parenting protocol of like, here's how to be a parent. And it's so beautiful. It's so, so good.
Ooh.
Um,
Oh,
and
I follow
yeah,
her on Instagram. Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
Read her book.
you
If you
shared this.
haven't read her book, it's so good. Follow her videos. So she's really just teaching parents kind of how to like do that emotion coaching, how to help children process their emotions and not there's not consequences for it, and like building more connection and allowing children's bodies to do their thing in a safe way so that they're not hurting people, but also that they're like getting the anger out. And then a lot of it is us as parents. And I would say this, like, I wish back in the day, like if I'm getting triggered by a child, that is my notice that I've got to go get some trauma healed, because if I can go heal that trauma, I'm going to show up better as a parent. So it's a children are literally our button pushers. So like if they're
Wow.
pushing buttons, that's literally your information to go do some sort of trauma work on that. And when you release that trauma, it's no longer a button that your child's pushing. It's just the child being angry, or the child, like, you just won't feel a charge. And when we don't feel those charges, we're able to stay in a cool, calm, collected state with our kids to teach them and guide them and coach them. And that's the goal. The goal is that we have a really, really like solid nervous system for them to kind of like um, work from. But if we're all charged, how do we help them? It's a
Oh my
hard.
God.
So
You know what's crazy, girl, is I was like, I think I need therapy again because
something hit a button, probably.
yes, well,
Yeah.
it's every time Israel like cries, but
Yeah.
like it's a certain type of cry and it's like high and long.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I sometimes I'm like, I have to leave the room because
Yeah.
I'm
So
like,
it's triggering you when
oh,
it's
so
just a crying. And
it's just a cry.
yeah, the more trauma work I've done, the more stuff I've gotten off my body, I'm such a better mom. Like, because I'm
Wow.
just not charged. So you could go do an ART session, and you could go do something. You could even do your own work with it, like close your eyes, think about that cry, notice where that's in your body, find out what that is, see if you can move that stuff off your body. So get imaginary, get visual. If you're struggling though, definitely go in and like let a therapist who's trained to like and go to an ART therapist is what I would say. You could probably in one session, maybe two, have that gone, and all of a sudden that cry will no longer like trigger you, which will
Wow.
help your son, because then like he feels your nervous system
Oh,
struggling, and like
yeah.
that doesn't help his nervous system. So
Yeah.
yeah, and then yeah, if we can just, so I would say that like really be mindful of what you're being triggered about and go do your own work, because it's not, the children are not the problem ever.
No.
It's our
No.
stuff of whatever we went through. And so we're not the problem either. It's just that trauma is the thing. Go heal that, and then you're going to be a better parent. You just will.
It's so
So yeah.
cool.
Yeah. Good inside, Dr. Becky. That's like my like hands down, like her
Go
stuff
to
is
guy.
amazing.
Oof.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And
You,
it's
girl, you
so
recommended
steeped
like
in
five
research.
books. I love this about
I
you.
know. You've seen my room, like my house. I'm like, I have
Yes,
books everywhere. I love
I
to read, because like
know.
there's some good stuff out there that you can
Yeah.
gain. Like the more knowledge you're coming in with therapy also changes it. Like you've already done a lot of stuff. If you go see an ART therapist, you're not coming in as a brand new client. You're literally like, I've done a lot of work. I just want to do, like, my son is triggering me, and they'll be like, okay, like what's your scene? Let's go. Like you can kind of come in from a more like empowered place too with your therapy, when you know what you're looking for and what you want and what you like want it to look like.
Ugh, Kendee, we hit a gold mine. I feel like I learned so much.
Yeah,
So where
that's
can
good.
people like if people are like, "Ugh, I love Kendee the way I do. So how can they like get therapy from you or from other sources? Like how can people reach you?
So I'm full. I'm not available. Like I'm not
Hey,
even have like
she's
a wait list.
that's how good she is, y'all. That's how good
Well,
she
like
is.
and really like yeah, I get referrals. Like I wouldn't be able to see anybody, so I do apologize. But like again, take whatever if you did connect with me, or there's things you liked about me, use that. Like you get to like find out, like, do I fit with this therapist? Like that is one of the most important things. Like, is this therapist a good fit for me? Am I liking how this is going? And trust your body. If it just like doesn't feel right, it's probably not the right therapist. And like even if they're trained in the things, like I do think it helps to like the more a person is trained across a few different modalities, the better. Because if I was just trained in ART, I'm not going to be nearly as effective as if I'm trained in like all these other tool belt things that I use. So I use ART, but I'm pulling out inner child work, and I'm pulling out, Gestalt stuff, and I'm pulling out like IFS parts work, and like I'm using all these things as I'm doing my ART with my clients, and that becomes like a beautiful kind of like creation. It should feel like art, like it's very creative because it's a human being using their imagination, and I'm just guiding or helping them like kind of move that stuff out. But if they go on to accelerated resolution therapy, that would be my go-to. Like find a therapist in your area, um, look them up, ask what else they're trained in. That will be, I'm always like, if you're going to spend money on therapy, you want to get the best bang for your buck, and that's going to be your best bang for your buck, 100%. Because you don't want to be there forever. ART is fast, it's super effective. Because I'm also trained in EMDR, and then when I got trained in ART, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so much better.
I remember
But
that.
I love the training I got in EMDR. Like again, but I don't use EMDR at all, actually. I'm trained in it and I don't use it. I just use ART.
Wow.
So that would be where I would start.
Mhm.
And then, yeah, just kind of asking the right questions. And I'm a huge fan of everybody getting healed. We should not have traumas in our bodies. We don't need to walk around with them. Our brains want to heal, our bodies want to heal. We're meant to be like happy, calm individuals for the most part.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you so much, Kendee. This was
Yeah.
such a good podcast. I learned so much. You were just this well of information and just so compassionate. I just want to
Mhm.
squeeze you.
I love you. I just love you. So yeah, hopefully it was helpful. Kind of give a different perspective.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much. Guys, have a great day. You're welcome.